you for, okay, yep, and you'll talk about that in a moment, Tamara. Okay, so just thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. So we have, I'll tell you an experience when I started, speaking about and writing about human-centered leadership a number of years ago. I did have a number of people that not only privately that would send me private emails, but actually they would do it also publicly, like on replies to my LinkedIn post. And they said, Luis, this whole thing, human-centered leadership, that's more kind of like theory. I don't think that I would hear like different feedback and different comments, but one that I thought was very interesting is that they said that a leader that was human couldn't lead a large organization, right? And I always like remember, oh, that's kind of an interesting comment, right? That if you are a human-centered leader, you really will not be able to lead large organizations. So what I've been doing is, with more research work, collaborating with other experts around the world, just trying to, get the information, the facts, the, documentation about human-centered leadership and the number of human-centered leaders that are out there. So, and right here, for those of you that are in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, there are a number of great human-centered leaders that are really doing an amazing job, not only leading their companies to fantastic growth, but what they're doing, for their people, their employees, the communities where they participate. So with that, for me, it's really an honor to have with us tonight David Mortenson. So David is someone that I know, personally, and you're here a lot of wonderful stories tonight. But I want to start by introducing David, and I'm going to introduce him formally, with his bio. But David is the CEO of a parent company, M.A. Mortenson Companies, and he is the chairman of Mortenson Construction, a privately held international design and construction company headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where many of us are right now. It's one of the largest contractors in America. Mortenson now has more than 6,000 team members in 11 North American offices. David leads a business that specializes in everything from renewable energy to sports stadiums, from hospitals to data centers. David joined the family business in 1991 after serving as the Combat Information Center officer on board on the USS Hewitt. And we have Margie, and I know others who have served as well, so there's that connection there. He led the company's West Coast business for 6 years before returning to company headquarters in 2007, and has been the driving force in positioning Mortenson as an industry leader in leveraging technology to transform the design and construction industry. So many of you that are here in Minnesota and have been to, TCF Bank Stadium, the US Bank Stadium, and a lot of sport stadium here that was done by Mortenson Construction. David has lived in Japan and Northern Ireland and has had direct responsibility for the company's Shanghai office for 9 years. So that's the whole professional piece. And I want to also include some of his personal information. So he's an active community member, serving as a trustee on the University of Minnesota Foundation Board, as a member of the Executive Committee of the Minnesota Business Partnership, a member of the Itasca Project, where I met David through the Itasca Project. He was a former chair, and he's the corporate director of Bedford Technologies, Hillcrest Capital Partners, so director of North Star Council of the Boy Scout, and serves as a founding board member of Greater MSP and former trustee with the Minneapolis Foundation. There's more, but stuff there. But I can tell you that he's been busy. He's been very involved, done a lot of things. But besides everything that was on that piece of paper, I want to say that I met David, I don't know, about 6 years ago. And as busy as he is, as leading a large organization, every time that I have had, difficult moments that I have looked up to him and reached out to for help, he has, always made the time. I've visited him in his office. I've been to his home. And it's just an amazing and very inspiring, and it's very encouraging that large organizations are actually led by human-centered leaders like David, who is here with us tonight. So what I'd like for us is to have the opportunity to engage with David, to ask him, what is human-centered leadership? What is the role of human-centered leadership? How can we lead, in a more human way? And those of you that have questions in terms of whether it's real or not, and what can we do? We received some of those questions already. have the opportunity to have that conversation tonight. And this is not about just asking questions. Feel free to say what you have. So welcome, David. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us tonight.
Well, thank you everyone for being patient with some technological difficulties. Tamara and Luis, I'm honored to be here. This subject is obviously close to my heart, and it's an exciting time, frankly. I think George Floyd's murder has really amplified how much leadership matters and how much human-centered leadership matters. And so I think this is a great opportunity for all of us as leaders to explore what that means and how we can get better.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And so I appreciate it. One of the things that we are doing today, so we're going to do a dynamic. So many of you on the call know me and my work. I've been, collaborating with other experts in human-centered leadership and emotional intelligence. And I have with me Tamara Torres. So Tamara Torres, I have collaborated with now for, a couple of years. And Tamara has been, working on the first training that Tamara had, which was productivity with heart. It focuses on how we can really, use techniques to organize our time so that we can have more time to be productive, but also to connect with the things that matter to us. Tamara has been training, a lot of people on mindfulness. And then now more recently, Tamara, you've been doing work on success. What's the name of a most recent training, Tamara?
Owning your success through accountability.
For that. Okay, thank you so much. Owning your success. So Tamara, you can share more about what you've been doing recently, but what we're gonna do is Tamara and I engage, with David and go, through the topics, but I obviously give you the opportunity for everyone here to ask questions to David directly or say, your own thoughts and comments about it. But Tamara, you want to share a little bit about yourself quickly before we get started?
Well, first I want to introduce you as well, since not everybody on the call knows you. Luis Moreno is training a new generation of leaders to be more human. He has over 18 years of corporate experience in 7 Fortune 500 companies. He leverages his expertise in human-centered leadership and emotional intelligence to collaborate with other experts like David and myself, and in order to foster workplace cultures that are healthier and happier. So I wanted to make sure that everybody gets an introduction to Luis. And for myself, I'm really happy to be here. The perspective that I bring here is more mindfulness based, and mindfulness and meditation are one of the key ways that we can learn to improve our emotional intelligence, to become more empathetic. So I have lots of thoughts on that, and I'm definitely looking forward to hearing other people's thoughts. As Luis said, not just questions that you have for us, but just comments of what you've noticed in your lives. And we realize that there's a lot of knowledge on this call outside of those that are supposed to be just the official experts or panelists. So I'm excited for the conversation and to learn from all of you.
Perfect. Let's start with a question. So David, we already received a question from a person that is here with us tonight. So it says, when coworkers talk negatively about other peers among each other, this is known to be incivility. When leadership is aware and takes no action, should you ignore it and move on as if it didn't exist? Doesn't this create a negative, toxic culture and increase tension? If you do address it, how would you do it in a human-centered way? And the person shares, I have addressed it in both in real time publicly and privately a few weeks later via email. I am interested in dialogue and discussion about this. So peers talking, bad mouthing other peers. Anybody had that situation, David? What is your thought as a leader? Ever been in that situation throughout your career?
I think that's a really good question, and it has a lot of aspects to it because it's not just about people talking negatively, it's about inappropriate jokes. Frankly, it would be the same thing if you encountered or there was a safety violation and you just walked by it. When leaders do nothing, the person assumes that they are condoning the behavior. So as a leader, it is really imperative to step up and address the issue. Now, I always say the most important thing to do is not do it in a confrontational way. You don't, if somebody makes a inappropriate joke, sometimes you have to address it right then and there. Or if they make an inappropriate comment, but more oftentimes, it's important to address it both with the perpetrator in private to say, listen, this is not what we expect. This isn't our culture. These are not our values. These are the kinds of things that we're trying to perpetuate as a business. And sometimes the person on the receiving end you need to follow up with also. But doing nothing is not an option.
There was David, I think there is a story in your career wherein some time ago when you were with a client and there was a situation then with a client, and in this case, how do you do? How do we go about it when the person who, or I would ask it more general then, what happens when the person who does the inappropriate comment or the negative action or behavior is our boss,
Right.
or our leader, someone of a higher authority,
or
the client.
In my case, yeah, our customer. And I was a young project manager in my early 30s on a large $100 million project with a customer who was in their mid to late 50s. And he was frankly using inappropriate language and was berating the designer in a meeting in front of everyone. And I wasn't going to confront it right there in the meeting, but after I checked my own values and gained a little courage, I went right over to his office and I said, I wasn't comfortable, and here's why. I don't think what you did was appropriate. He didn't say very much at the time, but the next day he came back to me, he apologized. And when we started the next meeting, he apologized to everyone.
Wonderful.
You take no action, he might perpetrate the same language and poor behavior. You take action and the person realizes their own mistake and corrects it.
Perfect. Thank you, David. And we have, as you were speaking, people are sending us here multiple comments. So let's go ahead and I'm going to address some of these. So Len send us and say, that we should be dedicated to building a society of ethical leaders. I like that, Len. Thank you so much. Great comment. Lisette Redding says, I'm at the office, cannot turn the camera. I had a chance of attending similar emails. I've always found them highly enriching. So let's see, how to make things work on a more empathetic way. And I get this question a lot, David. So people that here really have interest in having more empathetic work environments, but are not finding it easy when how do you change work environment to make it more empathetic, right? Lisette says, I believe that one way in which today we can achieve that on projects and economy, connecting with the COVID crisis is by considering the needs of each of the members of our team, leaving behind the way of thinking or believing that the members of a team are only robots, and that are there to do a job, but rather that they are human beings with needs and capabilities who, when taken into account and considered, make them feel integrated as part of a great family that will always see for the benefit of all, which will consequently lead to a corporate group growth. I love that. And I tell you that for years, training on human-centered leadership. I get this a lot where people say, I am in a work environment that is not very empathetic. I like to do something. I don't know what to do. And then hearing Lisette's word, kind of like this thinking that is more like robots that need to get a job done. How to bring some, David, share your thoughts. And then for anyone, after David that wants to add, your thoughts, what are things that have worked for you in terms of making work environments be, more human?
I'd be interested, how many of you have seen Google's research on high-performing teams?
I have.
Anybody out there? Yeah, a number of you.
Aristotle, right?
The thing that always has resonated with me is high-performing teams have psychological safety. Mm-hmm. And psychological safety comes from trust. And trust comes from empathy. And you only gain empathy by slowing down and taking the time to really know, understand, and care. And that's something we don't do often enough in business. We rush right in to problem solving and action. And when a team comes together, building that foundation of trust and mutual understanding, so there's empathy, is a necessary first step.
Perfect. Thank you. David, Tamara, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm thinking that since so many of us have transitioned to working from home, that managers are really needing to check in more consistently. Like, we can't necessarily see each other face to face or run into each other if we used to work in the office space together. I think managers are really tasked with saying, how are things going? Like, I know you have a toddler at home, and sometimes they run into the Zoom call, and I'm sure you worry about it being distracting to the rest of the meeting members. But that must be difficult for you. So showing that empathy of, what you may be noticing in the people that work with you, trying to be empathetic and understanding, but also just more consistently opening those lines of communication. I think also working from home, we have now these computer meetings on Zoom calls are becoming kind of windows into the homes of each individual. And we didn't expect to, instead of working from home, we're now living at work. And so it can be a very vulnerable situation, not just because dogs are barking and things like that, or you have to fix the bookshelf behind you. We're getting more intimate access to each other's lives just by seeing into each other's homes. And that's a very vulnerable situation. But I think there's also more of an opportunity for us to connect differently and maybe create some deeper understandings.
Yeah. And one last comment that I would add to that is I remember, so how leadership is evolving over time, that mentors used to tell mentees, it's like the trick to success is focus on yourself, focus on yourself, focus on yourself. And I think that language is changing, where it is obviously you need to focus on yourself, but then you also can open that focus so that you're not only focusing on yourself, but you're also focusing on the environment, on who else is, in your team. Like David was talking earlier about Google, about working in teams, is, you have to focus on yourself, but also focus on the other team and the needs of others. So servant leadership. And we have Gary Lindblad is asking us a question. How is human-centered leadership different and similar to servant leadership? Who wants to take that one? I have some thoughts there, but anyone?
I was going to ask you that question, Luis.
Okay. And, so I think obviously there is similarities. Part of it is, I know people using different terms. I know that like some folks are talking about heart healthy leadership, and then also leadership with the heart. But I think when I think of human-centered leadership, I think of leaders that, because I don't see it as either or. So a human-centered leadership is not one that, is not worried about the, financial well-being of the company, but is one who obviously has, a vision, has the drive to take the organization to where it needs to go and have, strong business results. But at the same time shows the characteristic human qualities, right? And those include, and you mentioned some of those earlier, David, of, empathy, compassion, understanding, trust, right? And I see it, for example, like when psychological safety. So when someone makes mistakes, I have been, and I'm sure a number of you have been in the situation where you make an honest mistake. You're working on a project and something, kind of goes, it actually happened to me not too long ago. And it depends on what kind of leadership you are under, because, it can be that you could either be under a type of leadership that gives you the environment and the platform to be able to go. And like, if I work for David, I can see how David, I would go to you and say, hey, here is what's happening. I made this mistake, honest mistake. What can we do? And that you would have that leader, that human-centered leader is a leader that connects on the human side to say, hey, thank you for coming and telling me. Let's look at, let's get all the information. Let's see how we're going to go about this and stuff. And then so show, understanding, and give a person another opportunity and help the person to resolve the problem, right? In a different type of leadership, you can be in a situation where you don't even want to bring it up. You know what? Not only that you wouldn't be so excited to, or you don't want to go and volunteer the information, but there are instances where good people, find themselves kind of looking for ways to hide the mistake that has happened because of the terror, the panic that mistake gets discovered. And actually, in some of the companies that have been involved in public scandals, when they do the investigation, and they realize that there were employees that knew about the situation, and some either didn't know what to do, were scared to bring up information. Some had tried to bring up the information, and then they were blocked kind of like by middle managers. So it's just kind of fascinating, right? That if we create it, if we create a human-centered leadership, or if we create a more human environment based on human-centered leadership, where people feel the psychological safety to speak up and say what's happening, it can actually save you money, right? A lot of money in litigation, in the cost and the risk of certain industries, where if the information, if we don't address those mistakes, they can end up being very costly mistakes. So
one thing that I would say, Luis, is I think human-centered leadership is a really important part of servant leadership. It is a pillar on which servant leadership stands. I don't know if you think of it that way, but one of the reasons I think of it that way is human-centered leadership puts people at the center, and understanding each individual and their needs and their capabilities and leveraging their strengths. My dad used to like to quote a Chinese proverb, which said, if you're planning for a year, plant wheat. If you're planning for 10 years, plant trees. If you are planning for a lifetime, plant people.
Wow. That's beautiful. I love it. So yes, David, I agree. Definitely human-centered leadership being one component of servant leadership. Thank you, Gary, for that great question. I think Gary is in California, right? Peter Machado, and I'm behind on the comments. Thank you so much for so many comments. I think I'm behind about 17 comments, but I'll read some. So David, back when you were talking about addressing comments, Peter Machado says that it's important to address those inappropriate, behavior in a human-centered way, because you can often make things worse if you address inappropriateness in an inappropriate way. I love that, right? So the mistake has already been made, and then you make it even worse. Let's see, we should seek to first to understand and then to be understood. I love that. This allows us to form our judgment around someone's intent versus their delivery. Often the offensive comment was born from a pure intent. Exactly. So sometimes someone can say something offensive purposefully, because they want to hurt, but sometimes some people may, who lack the actual training may say something that is inappropriate and then not necessarily.
The other thing I would say, Luis, is to be understood, you must first seek to understand. And to be heard, you must first seek to listen.
I love that.
And this was another great quality of my dad's. His ability to ask questions and listen first made people and their opinions rise to the top, even more important than his own, because that's where he spent his time and energy and engagement. And once people felt like they were important, it created a culture of care and empathy and collaboration and a feeling like you were empowered.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah. How do people feel, right? Angelo is like you will never forget how people make you feel. So Bobby Casimir, thank you so much for the comment there. Len Sean asks us, are you familiar with Robert Greene's 48 laws of power? And are these leadership laws human-centered? So Len, I have not read it myself, Robert Greene's 48 laws of power. Have you, David or Tamara or anyone tonight read Robert Greene's 48 laws of power?
No. I have not. I had some thoughts to share on what Bobby and Peter had said, though, when we get back to that.
Go ahead.
So to Peter's comments about addressing things that are inappropriate, I think the corporate world has become a lot more culturally sensitive this year, given circumstances, long overdue. And going back to what David had said earlier, is like if we see something that's inappropriate, if we don't take action, then we're kind of complicit in supporting that. And so I think what we see is maybe less overt inappropriate activity, but what we're seeing more and starting to recognize more is perhaps like microaggressions that people are just now becoming aware of as a result of unconscious biases that are coming to light. And I think as more of us are becoming more sensitive and finally being open to different types of training to see our own biases, that's been really helpful in the workplace and in interpersonal relationships in general. And then what Bobby was saying about the intention behind our comment, I think another wonderful advantage of emotional intelligence is that self-regulation and self-management, self-awareness, where we can take a step back and say, maybe that's not what they meant, and to look for that intent. A lot of what mindfulness in particular teaches us is to really pause and to learn to slowly respond instead of reacting, and that can be huge. And just thinking about some of the other components of emotional intelligence, in addition to that self-awareness and regulation, there's this intrinsic motivation to do things because it's right, and there's that empathy that Luis is so good at explaining, and just the social skills, the interpersonal skills, communication being one of those skills. And so we know that when we can learn to be emotionally intelligent, it's good for us, it's good for our colleagues, it's good for our teams, and ultimately it's good for the entire organization and for our productivity and bottom line.
Yeah, and I want to share something that you reminded me of, Tamara, that there philosophically, there is this concept of disconnecting responsibility from guilt, and then that we say from fault. I think so when we say we're all responsible. So I say, for example, okay, David, you are responsible. But when someone's here, you are responsible, people think that what is being said to them is you are guilty, like, you caused it. But actually, you are responsible. We are all responsible. Being responsible doesn't mean that we caused the problem or that we are, guilty. What it means is that we have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility to make things better. So for example, going back, I think that this is the comment of the night is how to address when, inappropriateness or something, like bad behavior, that we all have a role in that. So in this case is when we are in the room and something happens, a comment, that it's not the right comment, then we are all responsible, because it doesn't matter that we didn't say it. We were there in the room. So we have a responsibility to do something about it. And I have to share something that is very encouraging. Over the past, like 6 months, a number of folks have contacted me to share with me that one of the things that is changing for them, this year with what happened, with the social disparities, what they have learned is that they said, over my career, I have witnessed injustices done to other people. So because they were not being done to me, I remain, kind of indifferent. I didn't do anything about it, and I was okay with it. But I am no longer okay with it. So in the next time that I see, when I see an injustice done to somebody else, I will intervene and I will say something, I will do something, even when it is not to me. And I think that's very encouraging and inspiring, because that can transform our world when we all really care about any injustice. We have, it's like I can't keep up with all the comments, but I want to try to read some. So let's see, we have again more and more questions around team dynamics. And we have a question here from Len that says, what does it take to better understand a large team? So hold on that, Len. We'll combine it with other questions that are coming, similar questions on the team part. Can we list the attributes of human-centered leaders? So Christy Lassenberry, how are you? We have, I think that we addressed that after you posted the question. Let's see, Terry Gibbs says, I'm wondering if you try to create a workplace that helps people meet their fundamental needs. In particularly, are you aware of the alternative Nobel Prize winning fundamental needs work by Dr. Manfred Max Neef? I have a paper that I've written about it if you're interested. So yes, Terry, definitely. So I have not read it. I am interested in the paper. Please send it to me. Anybody has read the, let's see, what is it called? From Dr. Manfred Max Neef. Anybody familiar with that material? Oh, okay. Let's see. So, okay, more interest in human-centered leadership. I'm currently in the medical device industry, leading clinical trials. Very good. So how do we help people feel like they belong? How do we create a human-centered feeling? I'll go back to you, David. In your experience as a leader in your career, what have you done to help create an environment where people feel that they belong, that human-centered feeling?
Well, I think, Luis, if we're honest with ourselves, we have to recognize how far we have to go, where each individual feels like they can show up at work their full selves, and that they don't have to code switch. They don't have to put themselves into some shielded or shallow box that is defined by a culture in which they are working. It's one of the things, frankly, I learned post George Floyd, is that inclusive culture where people feel empowered to be themselves is a long way off. And it's a process of training and educating and constant reinforcement of what our expectations are as an organization in terms of values and culture that we expect everybody to be able to have and to share. It's a quest that we're on to create that environment, but I would be mistaken if I was going to tell you that we're anywhere close to arriving.
Thank you, David, for the honesty. Another human quality there, and honesty. So I really appreciate it. So Right now, we are, so again, I'll repeat, this is open for anyone who wants to join in and add your comments. We have what we're going to do tonight is we're going to do breakout rooms where folks have the opportunity to go into into small groups so that you can talk, with your fellow participants and just kind of share some thoughts about the conversation tonight. So I think, what time is it right now? 6:20, close to 6:20. I think, Tamara, we can maybe break. So here's what we're going to do. So far, right now, I know some folks have been joining, more recently. So for everyone on the call, we are here tonight, Tamara Torres and myself, we have as a guest, David Mortenson, who leads MA Mortenson. And he has been sharing with us some of his thoughts and perspectives on human-centered leadership. In particular, in this first part of the call, we have been talking about like how to address when we see something that is not right. And I think the conclusion is obviously we need to do something, not remain indifferent. So what we're going to do is, Tamara, you give me the signal when we can do it, is we're going to go ahead and break the group into smaller groups. What we would like for you to do is, with your small groups, talk about what we've been talking so far, reactions, what do you think, share your own stories, have an opportunity to meet the other people. And then we're going to get back. We're going to, let's take about 10 minutes or so, and then we're going to get back. We may not have the opportunity to have every team report, but we would love to, get your reactions and thoughts and questions and comments to David, to take advantage that David has made the time to be with us here tonight. What do you think, Tamara? Can we do that?
Yep, I got the rooms all ready. We're going to have 4 to 5 people in each room, and we'll go ahead and get those started and give everybody 10 minutes to connect and share. And I put in the chat, what are your thoughts so far, your takeaways, and what's been your experience in these areas. So Peter, the fact that empathy takes time is a real challenge to many people who feel like they have too much to do and not enough time to do it. I definitely want to address this question. Let's hear from some people in the that are joining back from the rooms. Who would like to share? And we won't get to everybody, but I can imagine there were some common themes that people noticed in their conversations. So probably the easiest way to share, since the chat's getting pretty long, just hit the hand raise button.
Yeah. All right, Len. I think Len wants to share something. Go ahead, Len. So remove that.
Hey, how's it going? Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
we can hear you. All right.
I think at its core, human-centered human-centered leadership has to define on you, right? The person, so that if you know who you are inside, then you can go forth and understand everyone else. And you have to provide vulnerability in that sense. If you are the leader, tell them your story first. And the only way you're going to tell your story is if you know who you are. And so when you know who you are, you tell your story. You have to teach others how to tell their story by telling your story and saying, hey, you remember how I told you a story about when I did this and this? Well, this is kind of the same and similar thing. And a lot of youngins, millennials today, because they're the median age group, they're going to look for power. They're going to look for some power. And if you don't have any power, they're not going to respect you. So how do you do that? We have to show them some power, either through storytelling or, for me, self-defense. I teach my people self-defense all day long, and they see that in me and they respect me for it.
I appreciate that perspective. That made me think of a couple of things. One is that we have to understand that different generations have different communication styles and different values. And it's really important for us to understand that so we can address those. And then also leading by example is another thing that you brought up. So that's excellent. Thank you for sharing.
And I love too that, Len, that the, that leaders have to tell their stories. I actually like that because, not all leaders share their stories, and it's the stories about their real, open and honest stories. So I love that. What other stories, what other comments do we have from people in the rooms?
Let's go to Christy next. She has her hand raised.
Christine.
Hi, Luis.
Hi,
Hi, David. Hi, Lori Creever.
A lot of friends here in the room.
We had a very human-centered conversation in our group. But one of the things that was brought up was for people who really like to see numbers and data, how does David measure his success as a human-centered leader within his company? How does he know the success that he has?
I love that, David. Right for you.
Well, in fact, we just finished a company-wide engagement survey. And we asked all 6,000 plus team members about 85 questions. And for us, a lot of that gets back to how are they feeling? How empowered are they? What confidence do they have in the values in the culture? I think ultimately that's our scorecard on whether or not we're creating the right environment. It isn't a scorecard around servant leadership or human-centered leadership specifically, but if we're doing those things well, I think they translate into really high engagement scores.
Yeah.
Love it. And the human-centered leaders use data too and metrics, right, to make sure that we're going in the right direction. I love that. What other comments from the breakout rooms? Who else?
Say, Luis, I'll offer one while other people are thinking, because one of the questions that Jose had asked was around how do you get your team on board these cultural elements, and he was describing how important it was to get senior leaders to be bought into this culture and be perpetuating it themselves. And I agree that that's really important, but ultimately, actually, that's in a big organization, that's relatively easy to do, because that's your colleague base. You're with them on a regular basis, engaging, and you're in these open dialogues together. I think the hardest thing to do in a larger organization is to thaw the permafrost of middle management. And middle management forms this barrier between good ideas rising up and cultural implementation that leadership wants to engage. And if you've ever worked with permafrost, it's not like just a little bit of spring frost in Minnesota when you're trying to build a foundation. It's deep, and it takes a long time to thaw.
Yeah. Thank you, David, and thank you again, for your honesty, and thanks, Jose Luis Brett, good friend of mine. Thank you for that great question, and thank you for being with us here tonight. Thanks, David. Okay, who else? What other questions do we have?
It looks like Darcy has a hand raised.
Darcy, let's do it.
Hello, hi, so happy to be here all. I just wanted to say, first of all, just really appreciate this opportunity to join this call. I actually know a colleague who works at your company, David, and she just absolutely raves about the culture. So it's so, inspiring to see you join a conversation like this. I think it really brings forward the ideas that a lot of companies are doing. My company is making efforts here as well. And I just wanted to just share that I think it's a great space for us to all talk about this and to know that other companies are making it a priority too. So I really just wanted to say thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Darcy. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I've learned so much. I've known Darcy for I don't know, like over a decade, and I just learned something from her all the time. Thank you, Darcy. Okay, what else? Who else do we have? Okay, Julie, do it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in our group, there was one person who raved about the culture in her organization. And I was so taken with it. And I said, can you share your organization? And it was Mortenson.
Oh, wow.
And I won't give it away, but I'm just saying you're walking your talk. And so that's really good to hear from somebody who's inside your organization.
Awesome. Very good. That's great to hear, David. And this was not a setup or anything. David did not pay us anything, there's no money, exchanged to here or anything like that. Okay. I want to hear more comments. Who else has something to say from tonight?
Luis, hello, how are you doing?
Hi, Julieta, how are you? So good to see you.
Good. Say, thanks for inviting me to the meeting. I know that I joined late due to another meeting. And then I came in right before we went into the breakout rooms. But we had a really interesting conversation just during that time, talking about leaders being vulnerable and how important that is in whatever environment we're in. And we also talked about, I was in the breakout with Lang and talked about how important it is also to get to know yourself first, so that when that vulnerability comes out and you don't know what's going to come back, once you're being vulnerable with the team, with the people that your peers, that is very, very important from an emotional intelligence as well as a human-centered leadership point of view, to understand who you are, understand where you come from, what kind of mindset you're going into, and that you already have established, so that you can actually practice your emotional intelligence whenever that comes back to you. And so I think that vulnerability is something that until a couple of years ago, I thought there is no way that I'm going to open myself up as a leader because people don't need to know that part of me or whatever, but it turns out to be a very powerful thing.
I love it. And there's the trust, I think multiple components that David brought up at the beginning of the call, right? That we're going to be vulnerable by trusting others before, it's like some people say, well, I don't, people have to gain my trust. So they start with zero trust and people have to work hard to be able to gain their trust. Whereas other people say, no, I start trusting you. And obviously if you lose my trust, then that's different. But, we start there with trust and knowing ourselves. I love that. Naslin, so okay, go ahead, David, go ahead.
I was just going to make a comment about the vulnerability and sharing stories. And we started an advanced leadership program within our organization more than 15 years ago, taught by senior leaders. And we tell our career stories. And my career story is a roller coaster, highs and lows.
No.
and it's emotional when you talk about a low in your career, and people are always taken aback that a leader is talking about their own failure. Yeah. But that is super important in terms of being an authentic leader and being an empathetic leader.
Thank you, David. And it's inspiring as well, because if we think that leaders are only on a trajectory up, straight up, then we say, well, I already, I have my lows, so I don't have a chance here. But knowing that leaders that did really well also had their lows can be very inspiring. I wanted to quickly, I know multiple people are asking for the word, but I wanted, Nazneen is in India. I think it's like 6 a.m. in the morning or something for her there. So you probably stay awake all night. Thank you, Nazneen. I love to have your comments.
Yes. Actually, my question is for David. He said he's part of large organization. So I understand what he explained right now about the middle management, where ideas come up and they submerge down. How to handle office politics in whether it's a large or a small organization, when groups are already formed, that's group dynamics is already there, and office politics works under groupism. So how do a leader comes as a real leader at that point of time? How can he break? Is it possible to break that group or make people at par? Yes, David, that's for you.
That's a difficult question.
I know.
Because I think it's a natural human tendency to want to form smaller cliques.
Yes.
And sometimes it's what gives people power. Sometimes it's what makes them feel good. And we, as an organization, try and set a culture that does not tolerate that. And we try and set a culture that is intermingling teams a lot across the organization. So it's not ever as stagnant, just this group of 20 people, different leaders and different contributors are moving into different positions and working with different teams all the time.
Okay, well said. I liked it. So you mean to say cross changing the positions of people over the time will balance the whole setup,
That's
right?
one. And two, you got to have a culture that doesn't promote or enable those cliques to exist or flourish anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Well said. Really liked it. I really appreciate your response. Thank
And
you.
thank you. We appreciate you being awake, Naslin. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Other comments?
I'm
We have 15 minutes left. I want to make sure we hear from everybody. Okay, Len, go ahead.
I think if you establish a curriculum and teach them how to tell their stories, like Toastmasters. You guys ever been Toastmasters here? Anybody? It's one of my favorite things to do. I love that. I love that group. I love doing Toastmasters. It's one of my favorite things. I teach it now, and I find it so fun. It's just so valuable, and as well as allowing these individuals to make mistakes, fail. You know, I mean, everyone makes mistakes, and you can't punish them for that. I mean, you got to laugh it off and say, hey, man, don't worry about it. It happens, you know. It's not like it's going to hurt you in the long run. So I think that's very important, especially with millennials, guys. Millennials are very sensitive, very empathetic, and they're empaths. Empaths at heart. So you got to show them power, and you got to show them empathy, and you got to be sensitive with them. But they're fun to be with. And
Thank you, Len.
that's where I go.
Thank you so much. And you know, so when you're budgeting for the company, budget for mistakes, so that you know, for the cost of mistakes, so that everyone can learn. All right, we have more comments, more questions for David, or comments for David. Gary, I think you wanted to say something earlier. I may have cut you off.
Hey, Luis, great to see you. So we had a great group. We had Lorna, Libby, and Kelly in our group, and we had a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. And in fact, we were doing this because of you, Luis. You invited, or they knew you from various places, and I said that yes, I remember Luis when he was an MBA student. We recruited him from Latin America, and he made quite an impact at the Carlson School, and so that's why I'm joining your group, and it's great to see the impact that you're making on this community. We had, you know, being out in California now, I was, you know, with the Carlson School some years ago. Being out in California as the dean of the Kroll School of Business here at Biola, it's so interesting the conversations that for the most part Minnesotans are having, and one of our participants referenced the George Floyd murder, and it struck me that, you know, of course, I've been following that because of my time in Minnesota, but also it's that event has affected everyone around the country, and around the world. But you know, as Minnesotans, David, I was wondering, how has that event created a real question about who we are, or we see ourselves as Minnesota leaders? I've always, when I was at the Carlson School, I really saw, Luis, as we brought students to the U, and that we provided a form of management education that was more human-centered, that was more servant-oriented, and that really cared about business ethics and about the human person and about human flourishing. And I think that's a part of the Minnesota ethos. But how has that event questioned that? And then how are you in your organization making sure that that the human that we're thinking about is more inclusive and includes everyone, including populations and communities in Minneapolis, even that that just really there's a lot of inequities, and so African American communities and other communities that can need to be able to share in the good that comes from good business and the productivity that can come from a great business.
There's a lot in that question, Gary, and actually there are a number of my personal coaches on this call today, and Christy Lazenberg I consider one of my DEI coaches. And I think what George Floyd has done has created a revolution of how we think about our awareness of the experience of people. Every single leader I know what would have said they were on a DEI journey before George Floyd. They had hired a director, they were making progress in diversity, but they didn't none of us realized how far we had to go and how little we had done. And at the heart of your question, I think, is this concept of Minnesota Nice, where just keep your head down and don't say or do anything that's going to offend anyone. So what we do is we don't actually include and engage anyone. We don't enter a courageous conversation that shares background and experience. And all of that creates barrier. And, you know, I want to say we used to be on a journey, now we're on a quest. And we are on a quest to stamp out the racial injustice, racial inequities, and create an environment for everybody to bring their whole selves and succeed. And that's in our business, in our industry, and in our community.
Well, let me just say from the West Coast perspective, we'd love to see Minnesota lead in that area. Because Minnesota-based companies, I think, have led in a lot of different areas in terms of quality, in terms of human flourishing and creating businesses that really serve society, and the whole country, the whole world needs organizations and companies that can lead us out of the challenges that we are in and that we face. And so wherever that leadership comes, that's fantastic, and it would be great to see it come out of Minnesota as a community, a business community that has been galvanized by this event and has the history and resources to address it, the sophistication and the approach and the heart to do that.
I want to share that David has a lot of heart, because when David and Luis and I met for a meeting to prepare for tonight a week or so ago, David had to get going because he was going to Lake Street that day, and he was leading up some volunteer teams that were helping to rebuild businesses. So I think it's not just about what you say is important, but what you actually do. And I think David is too humble to put that out there, but I think we should really acknowledge when people are doing good work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tamara. And thank you, Gary, for sharing that. Very appreciated. All right. So we are now at the last 8 minutes. And I apologize. I know we started late. So I want to make sure that everyone who wants to say something tonight, who wants to ask any questions to David or Tamara, they can do it. So let's maximize these few minutes that we have left. Who else wants to say something tonight? Jose Brett.
Luis, so great to see you, buddy. It's been a long time.
Yes.
So I jump on this, and I am enjoying it. Thank you. I want to say something. And I was in the breakout session with David, and unfortunately, due to the way that I connected, they could see me, but I couldn't listen. They couldn't listen to me. But one thing that David said that resonates is you gotta feel it, and and that tells a lot about yourself as a leader, that you feel it. And one thing is that once we see through as leaders, and especially in the diversity, once we see diversity as a propeller for better, rather than a compliance checkbox,
Yeah.
we are going to be, way, way much better than we are right now.
I love it.
So once we have that in mind, then we swallow and we leave it. We leave by it. Then I think that we're going to start seeing not only progress but transformation.
I love that. Diversity as a propeller. I'm going to use that, Jose.
Oh, no comply, no, just not comply. Leveraging the power of diversity. I love that. Okay, more. Go ahead, guys. Let us hear you. We
And
have.
it's interesting to see. I'm trying to catch up on the chat a little bit. The conversation that people have been having as to Lang brought up that empathy can be seen perhaps as a taboo because part of the about vulnerability piece. But Libby chimed in that said, no, we're seeing more and more EQ is really being touted as something that we want to see. And then Julie said, a good balance between empathetic, compassion, wisdom. It's just great to see everybody connecting and sharing here.
Yeah, love the chat. I couldn't keep up with the chat. I was trying to read every comment, but I just had to give up. All right, so the last few minutes, come on, guys. We want to hear you all. Who else has something to say?
Bobby also shared, he said, in my experience, diversity is the key to creating synergistic effects. And we're finally acknowledging that as well, that when we have diverse teams, not just racially, but all kinds of backgrounds and abilities really help to strengthen our teams and organizations. So absolutely, that synergy.
I love it. John Alto, go ahead.
Yeah, David, I'm just curious. There was a discussion earlier about leaders need to talk, right? They need to speak, and I fully agree with that. But I think we've all been surrounded by leaders that's all they do is talk, and they don't ever listen. So how do you put that in your organization? Is there any formalized things you do, one-on-ones or group meetings where you're doing the listening and your purpose is not to talk?
I love it.
Yeah, John, if you heard me say leaders need to talk, I think I misstated that because I would have said first, leaders need to communicate, but leaders also have to listen. And certainly post George Floyd, I probably participated in 8 different listening sessions, both internal to the organization, in the industry, and in the community. And that was an awakening for me, both of the experience of just listening, literally for a couple hours in some instances. And we don't do that often enough. And so I can't say we have a formalized process or we've created a way to do that, but I like that thought a lot. I think we do it one-on-one in how we engage in our presence throughout the organization because we take time with people, but we don't do it in larger settings, which actually might have some other benefits.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, John. Great question. Thank you, David, for.
I want to add, if I may, so I'm a talker, you know me, Luis, but so yes, listening is key. But I think that we're not looking at what we really need to do here. And I think David is doing it, is the action of engagement, the purpose, the right purpose of engagement. That's the first thing. Then listening comes after that. So listening, it is the consequence of the engagement. And we really need to look to that in a very active way.
Yes,
so we beyond listening.
And actually, Jose, I want to build on that. What you just said that I think is really important is that one kind of leadership that I've seen, it's not uncommon that there is a large, company event, and then the CEO this is not David, but the CEO will come in, and then at the beginning of a meeting says something, important and provoking, and something that may be inspiring, and everybody's now like all shaking and they want to engage and stuff, and then the moderator says, well, would like to thank Mr. Jeff, Jack, or whoever, John, and the person leaves. So this is a leadership where the person comes in, speaks for 10 or 15 minutes, and then leaves the message and leaves the room, basically. So it's kind of a one-way communication. I've also seen it on LinkedIn too, where someone, or on social media, where you have a leader that posts something that is really interesting and very powerful and puts it out there, and then people start reacting to it and they start commenting, but there is no reaction from the author. So it's like, I mean, you left that there and then you leave, and then like you don't care about what your comments, about the result, about the consequences of your comment, right? And I don't mean bad consequences, but positive comments, positive consequence and engagement and stuff. And so I think that in this case is the leadership where we are going to come in to address an audience, say something, and stay to then, like you were saying, Jose, I love that, to engage and then to listen and to actually respond to what people have to say about what you said, because that's how we're going to have that dialogue. And I know we are just at 7. Actually, I'm going to ask for those of you that can stay just for 5 more minutes. I love to ask anyone who hasn't had an opportunity if you have any, thoughts, comments, questions that you'd like to share. Even though it's 7, I love to extend it for a little bit so that folks can share their thoughts. Anyone who has not spoken yet, Terry, go ahead. Mute. No, you're okay. Okay, something else. Okay, Christy, you want to say something?
Just thank you very much for this. I do have to go, but I really appreciate this very much. This was more than I even thought it was going to be. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Christy.
David.
And thanks for
Christy, nice to meet you.
And thank you for
Nice to meet
coaching
you too.
David.
Louis, this is B.
Yes.
Brown. I don't know if you
Hi.
can hear me, but Louis, I just want to thank David, you, Louis, and Tamara for this opportunity to talk about emotional intelligence in the corporate world. It's well needed, about time. And thank you very much, David, for telling us your approach. And we can tell the connection you have with people. It was very obvious to me and many others. So thank you, David, for coming in to speak with us today. Again, my name is B. Brown. Thank you.
Thank you,
Welcome.
B. Thank you so much. Love to see you. Thanks for making the time. Peter, you had some comments earlier. You want to share some thoughts in our last minutes?
Oh, well, I had a question earlier about the achievement gap. That Minneapolis-St. Paul is particularly poorly placed in the list of where we fall in terms of the achievement gap. And I'm wondering if there's something to be said about how what leadership can do about that. I know that David has been very participatory in that issue in the past.
Well, I think it's a great symbol of some of the racial inequities that live in our community, and it's been a problem for decades. Mm-hmm. I actually think Alan Page's approach to change the Constitution of the state of Minnesota might be the only way to create enough radical change that we actually change the outcome. The state of Minnesota Constitution says we will just provide an education platform. It doesn't even say good education. And Alan Page wants to raise that bar and say every single student is required to receive a good education, and then let the legislators and the educators define what that is and raise our bar and standards for everybody, no matter what zip code they live in.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Peter, for the question. And thank you, David. And I think that's a really important thing because, I have one of the comments, I know you only have just a few more minutes, but I wanted to share this, that say, for example, in COVID, right, with COVID, so people say, oh, COVID, I'm fine. I haven't gotten COVID, or maybe I got it and I, recover, so it's fine. And I'm young, it's no problem. And then in that assessment, it's like a very individual and very personal assessment where you're really not paying attention to the rest of the things. That in the same way I feel when somebody speaks, about, oh, we're very proud of education in Minnesota. We're one of the best educations. And I think that we need to modify the language so that we can reflect some of those realities. So for example, we can say, hey, we are very proud of education in Minnesota. We have, there are still some inequities in how, we have an achievement gap and we have to work on this and that, where you can recognize the good thing, but also be aware of it. Because otherwise, say, for example, one of the population that has been affected by the achievement gap is the Hispanic population. So me as a part of a member of a Latino community, when I hear someone else says, oh, the Minnesota education is great, it's perfect, and this and that, I'm like, well, but like, what about for me, not for my people, right? And so we need to integrate that in our language, right? It's the same with business. How is it going in your business with COVID? And someone says, wow, that we make masks, so it's going great. Oh my gosh, it's been like this year is fantastic. I hope that this coronavirus continues because we're making all, right? We have to, hey, it's been going great for us, but I realize obviously that this has been very tough for the people, blah, 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 so we can incorporate the rest of the world. So just the last 5 minutes before we say bye-bye, anybody else that hasn't said anything tonight and would want to make sure that, you share your thoughts before we go? Going once, going twice. Okay, Paul, you want to say something? Paul Dominguez.
Yes, I wanted to share that in my classes, I really got a very high engagement. And the reason why is because I introduce a lot of culture. And my approach is non-intimidating. I'm another student, but with experience and no hair.
I love that.
But I introduce culture. I think culture, you should develop a nice work culture within your corporation, and that will help a lot because languages do not stand up in the air by themselves. They require of a culture. If you have a culture, that's engagement, and that brings very high results.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. So we could stay here tonight, for a lot longer, but I want to be respectful of your time. I know we started a little bit late. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us. I'm going to give the floor to David to, close us up. And then Tamara, you can also have, a few closing words for tonight. And then I'll just say, it's been a pleasure to see, your commitment for everyone taking the time in this, busy days on a middle of a week here to engage with us and your participation. I had a great night tonight talking with all of you, and thank you, David. Thank you so much, not only for the time that you've made tonight, for the honesty that you had, the sincerity to speak, to speak your heart, but how, the friendship that you've given me for, I don't know, like about 6 years, where you've really made time to help and support, and you really are an inspiration, and it's been a pleasure to be with you tonight. So please, some words, and then Tamara, some words after David.
Well,
and then
it's inspiring to see a big group like this who shows up at dinner time on a subject like this because they care and because they're trying to get better and they want their organizations to get better. So I'm inspired. And I love Paul's last thought there is that ultimately we're all students. And if we show up to learn all the time, we'll be on this journey of getting better and making those around us better also. So pleasure to be here. Thank you, Tamara, and thank you, Luis.
Thank you, David. Tamara, you want to close us out?
Sure. It was so wonderful to have the opportunity to connect with everybody. Obviously, these are conversations and topics that are near and dear to people's hearts, and we hope to continue these conversations in future events, and would love to be able to keep in touch with everybody via LinkedIn and email. And we'll be sharing some information in the post-event email along with the the replay for people that weren't able to stay for the entire event, or if you're catching the replay today, you probably got that via email. So thank you again. Thank you for being patient with our technical issues, and we appreciate it all. It looks like David wants to share a happy holiday message to send us.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Take care, everybody. Have a good evening or good morning, wherever you are.
Love to see you. Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.